We are Gotham Quilts. I am Andrea, and
I'm
we have
Jen.
Jen here as well. Yvette is behind the scenes. Um, Tonight, we're going to show you some binding and talk to you about how to do some different binding that, more than just your typical single fold, flip it over, plain. Um, a couple reasons, because this time of year, a lot of us are trying to finish up projects at the end of the year, trying to get things ready to give away for the holidays, maybe. And I mean, obviously, the binding is going to be the last step. And if you're anything like me, you put that step off for some reason. It's just like, it's not the most exciting part. So a lot of times it gets kind of not forgotten, but pushed off and delayed. So this is your chance, do some bindings, finish off some of those projects. Um, we have a couple things. I know we've showed you this before, but we have these really cool bindings from Art Gallery. So it's sold as regular yardage, but it has the strips already measured out and even has little cutting lines and everything, so that you can get really cool different kinds of binding. So as you can see, the striped one right here, it has wide stripes on one side and skinny stripes on the other side. So and I love a striped binding so much.
Yeah.
So having these options, so there's a pink one, there's a purple one, and a yellowy green one.
I love a yellow binding. There's something about it. Like it's kind of underrated. Everybody, yellow usually is my least favorite color, but a yellow binding will just really bring something like alive.
And it's got a little bit of green in it too. So
Yeah.
you could use it as a green or a yellow. Um, And then what else we got here? I have them all stuck together because we used this when we went to QuiltCon, so people wouldn't walk away with our samples. This is one of my favorites. It's
Yeah.
got different kinds of stitching. And so for this one, you actually get 4 different kinds. So depending on, so this is just folded in half the way you would fold any 2.5 inch strip of binding. But then when you would sew it to one side and fold it over, you'll end up with this design on the front or back, and then this design would be on the other. And same with this one. So then when I fold this one in half, you could have this or this.
Yeah.
So there's really a lot of cool things you can do with these. Here's another really good one. Um,
They'd be so fun for log cabin blocks too.
ooh, they would. You're right. Yeah, you could totally use this for like anywhere you would use a selvage kind of pattern or skinny strips. Here's another really well, there's so many good ones. The little flowers are really cute. And on the other side of the flowers, we just have some dots and other more little flowers actually.
Do you have the little cars?
Yes,
Those are my
that's
favorite.
the one I'm looking for. Where is
I'm a
that one?
boy mom.
Here it is. Here it is. So, and then this one has cars. So again, if you were to fold this one, you'd have cars on one side and this little geometric on the other side, or little UFOs,
Awesome.
or these little dashes. And then I have some samples too. So this one is the dashes on one side, UFOs on the other side, and then the blue one that I showed you. So this one I did it, I wanted to show all 4. So I did 2 different ones and then 2 different ones on this side. And Yvette is trying to figure out how to display us here on the screen.
I lean back like that's going to make a difference.
But yeah, so these bindings, they're really cool. And when these came out, I was so excited. Like
Yeah.
I think having them engineered and printed specifically to be bindings is just really cool. And there's enough of them that there's basically one for just about any project. So that's one thing. And then we were looking at using these bindings and then some other projects that we found, and sometimes just a single you don't want to necessarily add a border, but your quilt isn't quite ready to just go from pattern to binding. Like you need something to kind of break it up a little bit. This is an old project where it was a Michael Miller design challenge or something, and you could only use Michael Miller fabrics. So all of the prints on the front, and then I found this print binding, but to go and I really liked it because it picked up a lot of the colors that were in the other fabrics, but it didn't work. Just putting it directly next to this yellow and white, it just kind of got lost. But I didn't want to put a border in it, and I also didn't want like a totally contrasting border, or I mean binding either. So adding just this little flange here underneath the binding was just enough to
Really love that little detail.
yeah, just enough to add that little separation and that little pop of color, but not too much to overwhelm and like draw your eye away from, the center, what's really what you want people to be looking at. So that's an old example. And then I had this woven fabric that I did this as a class last year before. And I've just had the sample sitting around and I hadn't done anything with it. And this one of the binding fabrics was perfect color, and really liked the way it went with it. I love the stripe, but it was too busy to have them like directly next to each other.
Yeah.
Again, add that little flange, and it's just enough to separate the busyness of the body with the busyness of the binding. So we're
Yeah.
going to show you how to do that tonight. And while we were talking about it, we realized that Jen and I both do it different ways. So we thought, why not show you both ways? So we both made little videos to show you how we put the binding on, that we're going to show you now so that you guys can do it for yourselves too. So let's see who's going to be first. Let's
I
do
think show yours first.
sure.
Because mine's kind of a shortcut, I think.
I'm
But
not sure it is.
I want to
I'm
see how
interested to
yours
find
is.
out.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen yours, so we'll do a compare, and you guys are seeing it for the first time, and we're seeing each other's for the first time. So it'll be interesting to get your reaction, which one you like better, and also see which one we think is better once we've actually seen the other ones.
Yeah.
So so we'll play mine first, and we'll go from there. So this is attaching the binding to the back of the quilt. I do almost all of my, and I always sew it to the back first. So that's the binding is attached to the back. It has been pressed just so that it lies flat, basically. This is a 1 1/4 inch strip of solid purple that has been folded in half and pressed, and then cut to the same length as the project. So all you
Mhm.
do is lay it in there under your binding, and it's a little fiddly, so you do have to kind of, rearrange and stuff as you go because it isn't attached, but I end up doing that most of the time I'm sewing the binding on anyway, so to me, it isn't that much extra work, but you do have to pay attention a little bit to make sure and you're not, at the corners don't get flipped or something like that. So, but yeah, so um I'm using my Bernina 570 and the 10D foot, which has a center guide. So I like to
Mm.
just line up that guide right on the edge of the binding and then move my needle over. I think I moved it over 3 in this case. So it top stitches right on top of the edge of the binding. So here we are getting to the corner. And it ended up being a little bit longer than I wanted, so I just trimmed a tiny bit off the end there. And then getting ready to fold up the extra edge, but first you have to add the other strip of, of flange. You don't want to forget that. And I got a little too close to the edge here, so it made it a little tricky to get everything folded the way I wanted, but it worked out. And when I do bindings, when I'm sewing on the final edge like this, I always want to flip the bottom up first and then the side that I'm sewing on top of that, so that the machine is going down a bump as opposed to up a bump, if that makes sense. Hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit better here. So the side on the right hand side is sitting on top of the bottom binding. And then you just keep sewing until your needle is in the bottom binding. Stop with your needle down and turn. Get everything arranged, flattened out, and then you're good to go again.
It's amazing how differently we do this.
Because you do your, and then we sped it up so you don't have to, watch the whole thing. But as you can see, it is a little fiddly. You have to stop and make sure everything's still in place. Yeah, you do your regular, when you sew a regular binding on by machine, you do it differently than I do too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so nice. There's no wrong ways. There's
Exactly.
zillion ways to do everything.
Exactly. Yep. There's always more than one way. And like she just said, there is no wrong way to do it. If it works for you,
has something different that works for them. It's Andrea and I are very similar in a lot of things, and then like watching each other sew, it's like, why the hell are you doing it that way?
Right.
But yeah, this is different. This is cool. I've never seen it done this way.
It's less work ahead of time, I think, than your way.
Probably
more fiddliness, at this point.
Yeah, I think this way might be a little bit more, you might be able to get a higher level of precision than what I do.
Maybe. I'm interested to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's folding the bottom up first and then the side.
And I don't really like doing the back to the front because I'll show you when we're back to
full stitch. Yeah, my back is not. Yeah, the stitch line is not lined. Well, in this case, it doesn't line up with the binding on the back. So I do have a very obvious row of stitching.
Right.
But normally I can do it, like if I were doing this on a real quilt, I can normally do it pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I do it from the front, it's perfect. Like on the back, you can't tell.
Right. Yeah, my back, you can tell.
But
for something like this, like nobody's going to see the back.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is like you and I will look at it and go, oh, that could be a little bit better. And this not most of the people we're giving quilts to, quilt gift recipients are not as exacting. And if they are, you need to stop giving them quilts.
There you go. That's right.
They get a gift card.
And then this is where we're almost back to the beginning again. So the flange on the bottom edge was already there. And it does help to have that stiletto when you're doing these corners, just so you can hold it right up to the front there. And because of all the layers, they do sometimes get caught, especially in the 10D with the extra guide there. So you do, I was lifting up the foot to make sure to put all the layers back down under it so that it didn't get weird there. And now,
do you use your knee lift or are you using your button?
No, I used the button.
No.
So Timmy is saying totally different than what I saw. I like this so much better. And to be honest, no one ever showed me how to do this, or I never read about it. It was just when I was making that yellow quilt, it's like, oh, I need a flange. This'll work.
Yeah. I've done one with piping before.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
I don't think
That's
I've ever
fun.
done piping.
It's fun, but it's fussy.
Yeah. Yeah, so there you go. You can see the nice sharp corners and that little flange there. And you can adjust so you can kind of control how big you want that flange to be. I was just lining the raw edge up with the raw edge of the quilt, but
Yeah.
you could move it in a little bit and make it wider if you wanted to.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. All right. Mine is a little different. We sew together two strips. One is fat, and that is the forms the flange. And the skinny one forms a binding, which I express my confusion in the video. But then you get this. So it's hard to see,
Okay. Uh-huh.
but yeah.
Yeah, let's see.
All right, boss. You got to play the other one. Step one of preparing for your faux flange binding is to cut your strips. So you're going to want to cut the flange that is going to be, the skinny flange bit is going to be cut at 1 3/4 inch strips. You need enough to go around your quilt plus about 12 inches. The part that's going to be on the outside is a little confusing. This is the narrower strip. You're going to want to cut that at 1 1/2 inches. Trust me, it works out right. Every time I do it, it's a bit of a, okay. So you're going to want to cut enough strips to go around the outside of your quilt. Ideally, what you should do, measure your piece, figure out the length of your strips, and do some math. Or you can hold your fabric up to your piece and see if that's long enough, which is the system I usually use because I'm lazy.
Yeah,
Step
I do that a lot too.
with our strips, we're going to line them up right sides together. Mine are solids, so it doesn't really matter. We want to have them lined up at a 90-degree angle, and we want to sew across the top. I've got my selvages on. They're going to get trimmed off in the next step.
I do the same.
Ideally, thread color should match. It can't just be simple. You got to teach a whole workshop. Our free spirit, just use whatever's in your machine.
Yeah, that's why I didn't even talk, so that way I can say whatever needs to be said later.
This one just has the one join.
So you combine your strips before, that makes sense, before you add the faux flange. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm just
that way
going to clean
it lines up.
Dog ears up too. Yeah. Anything I can do to remove bulk in the binding. And I just jabber. I'm now trained. The camera's running. I'm talking. So I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to press the seams open on the join. I always do that on binding to minimize bulk in the binding.
Same. One thing we definitely do the same.
Yeah. Next step, we're going to stitch our strips together, right sides together. Double check your seams to make sure that the raw edges from your joins are facing the outside.
Yeah, especially with a solid.
That can line up. It's best if they don't match up perfectly. But double check that. It's super easy to make a mistake on this step. Easier and harder. Very frustrating.
Exactly.
So we're just going to stitch this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I had somebody ask me how I could tell the right side from the wrong side of the solid. It's like, if I can't, nobody can.
There isn't one.
And we're going to do this all the way
until you sew it. Then there's one.
Right. And I want to press it towards the narrower half.
So what you had one that was 1 1/2, and what was the other?
1 3/4. It does make a difference
1 1/2 and 1
in the way
3/4.
the finished binding will behave for you. I think it's probably thinner than yours. I kind of like yours is like a little bit sturdier. For me, that extra layer fabric. And you want to make sure that
I guess it would be.
Yeah. And what I mean,
it's hard to tell with this one because it's so stiff already.
But you want to make sure that there's no, I want it this way. We don't want any folds in the fabric because everything needs to be even to keep the flange consistent. All right, so now is when the magic happens. All right. We want to bring this over, line up the raw edges, and then give it a good press. And you see that flange forming? The faux flange? Look at how cool that is. Oop. And it's very warm.
So it's important to keep everything really
Yeah,
consistent.
I'm using straight of green.
Definitely straight,
Keep
yes.
your edges consistent. That will keep the flange looking consistent, because if you
I
don't press
never use bias for
accurately,
binding
your
unless I'm
flange is
going around a
gonna
curve.
Same. Or unless I need
be visibly
diagonal stripes.
irregular.
True, unless you're trying to get
And
like a
it'll look
diagonal
pretty
stripe or
obvious.
something. Yeah, if there's a visual reason for it,
Just
yes.
give it a good press.
That's true. Yes, the technique would be
Keep
the
your
same
raw
if you
edges
were doing
lined
it on the bias in both cases.
I've never tried
And
the
look at how cool
bias.
that's gonna look on
Like
our
that's
finished
like
quilt.
that's some next level.
That's very
Yeah.
warm.
Yeah, I wouldn't want
On my little
to,
fingers.
but I don't see why it would be any different.
I
It
like to
should
have a lot of
work, but-
excess at the end. Helps join the pieces. So I've got the
It's
raw
pretty
edges of
narrow.
my
It's like-
binding lined up to the raw edges of my
Finish.
quilt, and I'm going to start stitching.
Oh, Andrew, I'm answering as if everybody can see. If it asks how wide my flange is about 1/8 of an inch.
Okay, so yeah, mine got bigger.
I'm going to stop right here.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
adjust yours.
Right.
Just a secure thing.
No, no.
Yes. It would definitely be squirrelier if you used bias.
Pencil.
Totally, Kim.
And I'm using my 45-degree ruler, my tiny ruler. I'm going to make myself a little mark, and that's where I'm going to pivot.
You pivot?
Yeah, how do you do it? Get the miter?
I just take it out of the machine. I stop a 1/4 inch from the edge.
Again, we're going to turn it.
Oh.
Make sure everybody's lined up nicely.
I saw this years ago. It
Flip
works
back
every single
over.
time for me. I get a nice tight miter.
Hey, then do it.
Yeah. This part is the weird part.
And
You
stitch.
start stitching off the edge and right over it. And I
We're going to stitch it
try
down.
to cut. I do hum.
And this is the rejoin spot. So I'm just going to stitch a few inches here. And then I'm going to break my thread. All right, here I am. I've got the binding on all 4 sides, and I am going to go to this, the shorter piece, and I am going to trim a little bit off. Maybe
Yeah,
about
I
that much.
demonstrated all of it.
And then
Mhm.
I'm going to use that as my ruler. This is
But
how
that's
wide I
okay,
want the
'cause there
piece
could
to
be people
And I
that
may
need
not
to
have
see
enough
this.
space to
Yeah.
work with. I'll show you what I do next.
This
And
part's
you do
always
this differently than I
Lay
do
this
too.
piece on here,
Oh,
and where
wow.
that lines up, we're going to want to take a pen and our straight ruler, and I'm going to line up here, and I'm going to draw a line right there. This is where I'm going to cut. Totally okay, by the way, to overlap your binding ends if that's what you're comfortable with. This is just how you do the invisible join, which is one of my favorites. All right, so then we're going to take these 2 pieces. We're going to stitch them together. This, I feel like I need a little more space. I'm just going to pull it back. You can use a seam ripper, but you can also just pull your stitches back a little bit. All right, so now I've got my 2 pieces, and I want them to go together. And it is very easy. I have
All right.
often made mistakes on this part. So I'm going to grab my pins.
This is when I realize I need that line.
I never think to do that before I turn the camera on. And I am going to, well, first, let's see. Let's do this. Let's draw a 45-degree line. Using the 45-degree line on my ruler, we're going to open up the binding and mark. Okay.
Make an
And we're
A.
going to
That's
line these
good to
2
remember
up.
it. I do this temporary pinning because
And usually I just stitch it,
To make sure that it's
and
right
then look
before
and
you sew it.
but there is a better way, and that is to put a pin along your seam.
Yeah, that's what I
couple of
tell
pins.
my beginner
All right,
students
it's
to
kind of
do.
baste it to see if it works, and then flip it and make sure that things are aligned. And so you can see I'm off here, but that may not be an issue. I'll double check, but make sure that your colors are lined up in the right direction. That means things won't be flipped all over crazy, which
When I'm
sometimes
binding
happens.
all the time,
What
I
I'm
do
going to do to make sure that the seam
but
is
if I
lined
take a
up
break,
is I'm
I
going to
forget.
look here where that line crosses this, and I'm going to make sure that they
Yeah,
are
because you
lined up.
definitely want the seam to line up in this case.
And that way, when I stitch along that
It
diagonal
would look
line,
not so
everything
good
will
if it didn't.
be better.
It's very obvious if
I'm
it
not going to
does.
say perfect.
Yeah, your eye
because
would go right
this is
to
on a
it.
video. It never works out perfectly on the video. So now I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to sew right along that line. All right. Stitch together. You can see I stitched along that line. It can be a little fussy to get it under your machine. Just make sure, it's always better to have a little extra space here than really tight. When it's really tight, it gets hard to maneuver. I like to give myself like a full 12 inches, maybe 18 inches.
Yeah.
I stitched along that line, and then before I cut, I double check. Pretty good. I mean, that couldn't get much better for the matching on that.
Yeah.
So now it's safe. I will trim and give myself about 1/4 inch seam allowance.
It's not a good way to hold your bias to your binding to trim either.
Press this
No.
open.
All the time.
I've cut the inside of
I
my
always want to press
thumb and forefinger before too.
More than once. It's like, oh
So you
man.
don't want to have a big lump.
And that's a terrible place to get a cut too,
Side.
because it just keeps opening up.
And we can do this little action, give this a press. And again, I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm going to stitch from here to here. All right, we're getting so close. The magic part's going to happen soon. So you can see I stitched. Now I want to go around my piece and I'm going to press.
Yeah, that's the same thing I
Actually,
do
I'm really ironing
for any
'cause I do
binding.
push.
Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
then
press my
it's just
binding away
easier to
from
get
my
it wrapped
back
around
so
to
that I get a
the
nice,
front.
clean edge.
It looks so much better.
It just makes
Yeah.
for a tidier finish.
Took me a while to embrace that, but
Yeah, when you've got a
everything
really
looks
big quilt, it's not always
Okay,
easy,
flip it
but
over.
it will actually make your life
To the
easier
front.
in the long
Yeah.
run.
it feels like every time somebody's like, look at this fussy step, I'm like,
We
oh,
are
I'm
going
putting that in my
to-
repertoire.
I'll do a couple of clips here, but
This does
mostly I'm
look
going to
really
do it
good
fishy.
with the little flange there.
You can see
Yeah.
that faux flange.
And this, if you're wondering what fabric this is
I'm
that
just
Jen
gonna
is
start in the
using, it
middle of
is
one edge, and I
the
am
Frank
going to
Lloyd Wright
carefully line up
collection.
my needle
We are out of
with
stock
the
of
very
those
seam on that
particular
flange.
prints at the moment, but we have them coming back
and
in
I'm going to stitch in
November.
the ditch all the way around.
And we're taking
in this
pre-orders now.
Flange seam.
I don't have the 10D for
And
it.
that's going to make it look like
I love the
Why
10
real
D.
flange.
She's got it.
This would be good if you have that foot with the edge stitch foot. This would be a good place for it.
It would be, yeah, this would be perfect. Because you press your seam to one side, not open, so you would have a
And
little
if
ridge
you
there.
If you press it open, it does
it's
not cooperate.
cooperating, and you have
Oh, how do I not? I
lovely.
no, I don't know.
stiletto.
The guide got in my way.
Okay.
I might have it somewhere, and I
Encourage it.
Yeah, I'm surprised I never tried to talk you into getting it.
I don't know. Sometimes if something frustrates me, like if I can't get the pins close enough or something, like it's just dead to me.
All right, what do you think?
I love that foot.
It's a nice
Yeah.
little detail, isn't
That looks great. Yeah, that's really nice.
I really like the faux flange. I think it's fun. I think it's makes more sense to me than trying to shove a little skinny thing under there, but Andrew did it the other way,
Hey.
and she did great. So try both techniques and see what you like for best.
Yep, there you go. That's the moral of the story. Try both ways and see which one
Right.
works better for you.
Oh, and you can bet that the two of us will both be trying the other one's technique. I will definitely.
I don't plan on binding anything again for a little while.
I had to struggle to find something. I'm like, oh, orphan block. Okay, let's quilt that.
Yeah, I do. I am waiting on Yvette to quilt my last quilt top for me. So whenever she gets around to that, then I'll have a binding, but I'm not sure when that's going to be. And yes, Timmy is mentioning, yes, the little flange really does make a big difference. It's those little touches that can really make your project. And it doesn't like you said, it's little and you wouldn't think it would make that much difference, but it really can.
It really it just gives like a little, it's like a period at the end of the sentence. Like it just gives the design somewhere to stop. It's not the same as a border, like because we
Right.
sometimes we're like, oh, a little anti-border. I don't always want a border, but it gives it a little something, a little visual stop.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
this
and
is the
sometimes
only
that's
time
just what you need.
I will do the binding to the back, from the back to the front. This is the only way. And I don't think
Okay.
there's I could we do this by hand? I don't think there's a way to hand finish it. I think it would hurt.
Hmm.
I don't think
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't I did the yellow one I did. Oh, it's in my it's in my lap. No, this one was done by hand.
Oh, yeah?
So this one I sewed it. Okay, so I layered the sandwich and then put the flange on top and then the binding on top of that and sewed it to the front first
Okay.
and then flipped it over and hand sewed it to the back. So yes,
Interesting.
you can do it, but
Yeah,
it's a different technique.
different
And
animal.
because this was going into a contest, I actually did hand sew the binding, which I normally do not do.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Judy said she enjoyed our demos. Great.
Yeah, just having these little things in your toolbox, you never know when you might come up, you're working on a challenge and you have limitations that you have to stick to but you just need something to, just something. And so you guys now have this tool. You can add this to your toolbox and got two ways to do it. So whichever one you think looks better for how you like to work, give it a shot. And and if you have something small, a little orphan block or a little, placemat size thing, placemats are great for practicing things like binding, um, practicing machine quilting too, honestly, because
Yeah.
it's low, it's a not a big commitment and it's low risk. If you end up hating it, so what? It's a placemat, you didn't spend a ton of time on it like you do for quilts, and you can really explore some techniques that you might be afraid to do on a big quilt.
Yeah.
And then if you do like it, you can end up using it. So it's a great. Pillows are also a good thing to practice on. Um, and that way you don't feel like you're practicing just to practice. You're still you'll still end up with an end product. So you can kind of sneak in your practice while also making something. um,
Especially with the holidays coming, like this is like, so this is a little kind of throwaway project, but I could give this to somebody who has a pet or a baby doll or whatever. Like, it's a little something. And obviously I spent some time and I spent some care. And it's a cute little gift. And that way they can have a quilt and I don't have to make a huge bed thing and they don't have to pretend that they like it.
exactly, yes. And we all have orphan blocks laying around. I
Oh,
mean, if you've been quilting for any amount of time, you have orphan blocks. So you've always got something you can practice on.
yeah, and a little
um,
technique like this would be a good way to go into that UFO closet and go, oh, you know what? This would be fun if it had this, and then it would be done and out of here.
exactly, that's right. And then you can gift it or donate it or move it out and be ready for the next new thing. So you have two different techniques for doing the flanged binding, a faux flange and a real flange. And then also the bindings, these binding strips or binding fabric, I guess, that is printed specifically for binding. So you can have some really cool effects on your binding and make it more special, I guess. It's always special, but a little bit more special. So we have, I think there's 8 different prints that we have, which we sell as yardage. And then we also have bundles. So you can get a half yard bundle of all 8. And a half yard is enough to do like a throw size usually, a good size throw usually. So that way you can try all of them and see which ones you like. And then, if you need some for a queen size or king size, you can always get a full yard as well. So these are so much fun. I like having that half yard bundle so that I have the assortment because sometimes you need the pink, sometimes you need the yellow, sometimes you want flowers, and sometimes you want little UFOs.
Do we still have
So
the black and white in stock?
yes, yes, we have all of them in stock. The
That
black and
was the
white is
one.
definitely the most popular.
That one sold out at QuiltCon. That
Yes,
was.
it was the first, and I think it had sold out in the store before that too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, but
Very
we have plenty of all of them. I mean, look how versatile this is. You could use this on anything.
absolutely.
Kids, grown-ups, all kinds of stuff. There's another one that I didn't show you yet. This blue one also is really
Oh,
versatile.
nice.
I mean, blue is my color, like everything is blue. So something like this, I can definitely find things to bind with that. And then, of course, for your cute little baby quilts, we've got the fun cars and UFOs, or the little girly flowers.
Mm. What
So
what widths did you use on yours? What strip
these are
widths?
2.5, I
And for your
think.
flange?
You know what? The strip I cut was 1.25 inches, and then folded it in half. But you could play with that too. I think I don't remember what I cut for this one. But you can play with different sizes and move it around. And well, that's the other thing. Even if you don't change the size of the strip, you can just move it, a little bit further away from the edge of the quilt so that more of it is exposed,
Mhm.
or cut it a little bit narrower and move it in a little bit more if you want it to be really narrow. So there is that versatility as well. Um, what else? Yeah, I guess I got all my little strips here. It's kind of getting kind of crazy. Let's see. Do we have any? Oh, Andrea, could you tell us your cut widths again? Yes, which I think I just did, but I'll say it
That
again.
was what I was.
I always cut my binding at 2.5. Um, I think a vet does it at 2 3/8 or 2 1/4. Um, yeah, she's just at 2 3/8. And I
Doing
know some people
2.8.
do 2 1/4.
I do 2.5 too.
Okay. Yeah, I always thought 2.5 was the standard,
Jelly
but
rolls are already cut
um,
that way.
exactly. So, and all of these strips, the 2.5 edition, are to be cut at 2.5 inches wide. You could cut them a little bit narrower, I think, because they give you a little bit of there you can kind of see the scissor. So there's a little bit
Mm,
of non-design there, just between where you're supposed to cut. So you could trim it a little bit more if you did want a narrower binding. Um, but like we were saying, there's always more than one way to do something, and there is no wrong way. So if you like yours at 2 1/4 or 2 3/4, go for it. There is no wrong way to do it.
right.
I agree. 2.5 is so much easier to sew with. I like to have that little extra. I don't like when it's too tight and I can't quite get it over the edge.
Yeah.
Um,
I think this is Raquella is Timmy. That that yeah, 2.5. I've had people tell me like 2 1/4, and like we used to have customers when I bound for customers, like they could save money if they provided the binding. Oh my God. Oh
oh
my God.
no.
We should have charged more because they would give me really narrow bindings, and it was like, how? And I do it. I will attach it by machine.
Yeah.
I will not do it by hand.
Yeah.
Once in a while,
But
I'll do a big stitch by hand, but
no, yeah, that it's not worth having to fight it to get it to fold over and cover your previous stitches. And
yeah,
that's, I don't want those stitches to show. So I
right.
definitely
Yeah,
so yeah, go ahead and make it easier on yourself. Go for the full 2.5.
absolutely.
Okay. I don't see too many questions, and I can't think of trying to think if we have any housekeeping. Block of the what is it? I don't even know what day it is. Yeah, no, everything for October has already gone out. I am putting together the retreat packages, so those will be shipping soon. And I think that's about it. So thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. Um, we will see you back here again next Tuesday and show you something else.
Right. Thank you.
Ah.